Okay, so this is Bible study for First Timothy chapter 5, verses 1 through 16. And the text says, "Do not rebuke an older man harshly, but exhort him as if he were your father. Treat younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters with absolute purity. Give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn first of all to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family, and so repaying their parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. The widow who is really in need and left all alone puts her hope in God and continues night and day to pray and ask God for help. But the widow who lives for pleasure is dead even while she lives. Give the people these instructions so that no one may be open to blame. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. No widow may be put on the list of widows unless she is over 60, has been faithful to her husband, and is well known for her good deeds, such as bringing up children, showing hospitality, washing the feet of the Lord's people, helping those in trouble, and devoting herself to all kinds of good deeds. As for younger widows, do not put them on such a list, for when their sensual desires overcome their dedication to Christ, they want to marry. Thus they bring judgment on themselves because they have broken their first pledge. Besides, they get into the habit of being idle and going about from house to house, and not only do they become idlers, but also busybodies who talk nonsense, asking things they ought not to. So I counsel younger widows to marry, to have children, to manage their homes, and to give the enemy no opportunity for slander. Some have, in fact, already turned away to follow Satan. If any woman who is a believer has widows in her care, she should continue to help them and not let the church be burdened with them, so that the church can help those widows who are really in need." All right, well, this is a lot to take in, and there's a lot of instructions, and I think we could probably take them um, legalistically instead of understanding what Paul is trying to say and why the instructions are such. And I think if we did that, we'd probably miss some other applications that are beyond even the instructions that he's given that apply the principles that he's talking about. So I want us to dig a little deeper and not be quick to be offended by whatever thing seems to be critical of us or somebody we know or somebody we love, but rather to recognize what he's pointing out, recognize the concerns he has, and to see where in our lives, in our church, in our families, might those same concerns be probably needing to be addressed. And maybe it's not the exact situation, but maybe it's the same concern. Um, and uh, and I think as we read, particularly the letters of Paul, sometimes we find sound like hardcore theological teaching, instructions. This is right. This is wrong. And sometimes we find pastoral wisdom from experience that is not necessarily hard and fast, this is the way it always should be, but is I think we need to watch out for this in the church, and we need to watch out for that. And those things show up sometimes in this setting. And so I think it's important for you to pay attention to this setting and this group of people. Um, I think about our church has had men's ministries before and women's ministries and women's groups, and we don't have them right now, largely because we have lots of ministries that minister to men and minister to women, and we don't necessarily feel like we always have to have a ministry that breaks up the groups and always ministers to this people and whatever. but we can also minister to men and women together in Bible study, which we do regularly. Um, but the reason I bring that up is because men's ministries can be great. They can also be the downfall of the church. Men's ministries can be opportunities for a really wise person or a group of wise, godly leaders to sort of mentor a larger group of men and talk to them about what it means to be a man of God, and really sort of disciple a group of people. They can also be a setting where people meet, and I've often seen that somebody who does not really have much authority within the overall church, Lord, sort of lords over this smaller group of people, where if the pastor's not there and these people aren't there, then I can sort of have my influence here. And sometimes that influence is not godly, not what we want. So I've seen it be a real problem in the church. Women's ministries too, the same way. I've seen them become a real problem in the church. Now, if I had a young pastor like Timothy who was talking to me about their church, and well, this they want to do a ministry for these folks or these folks, I would say, okay, here's how that can be good, and here's what you need to watch out for. Men's groups are notorious for being awesome times of accountability. They can be awesome times of accountability where people share openly sin that has taken root in their life that they may not share otherwise in a mixed group. And that can be a powerful opportunity for growth and discipleship. It can also be a place where, oh, you have that sin, I have that sin too, and then we all feel better about holding on to that sin in our life because we're not the only one, instead of being accountable and holding each other accountable to have victory over that sin that has taken root in our life, and has been such a part of our life in the past. And so if I was to give advice to a young pastor who said, oh, there's some folks in my church that want to start this ministry or that ministry, I would say, all right, for men's ministry, here's what you probably should watch out for. Here's what I wouldn't probably allow. Here's what I wouldn't do. It could become more of a problem than a benefit. So I say all that to say that this text for me seems like advice to a young pastor, and we need to be careful about seeing it as a blanket, some blanket commands in this case. But there is really good wisdom in here that we do need to receive and figure out what he is meaning by it, what he is cautioning against, and how we should respond to it. So number one, remember that you can download PDF copies of our Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive. And number one says, how does 5:1 say that Timothy or any of us should treat an older man? A, let him know there's a reason that you are in charge and not him. We've already read the text where Paul tells Timothy, "Don't let anybody look down on you because you are young," um, and uh, so um, some young pastors would say, "That's right. I don't let people look down on me because I'm young. So when those older guys, start getting down on me, I just tell them I'm in charge. There's a reason I'm in charge, and you're not in charge." That is not probably that's not going to work. That is not going to um, help them listen to you better. It is not going to help your leadership thrive in the church. This is not going to work. So Paul gives different kind of advice. He says, B says, don't rebuke an older man. No, I want to stop, because that's also not what this says. C says, don't rebuke an older man harshly. So rebuke basically means to correct, and it doesn't say don't correct an older man. It says don't rebuke them, don't correct them harshly. Um, and so we need to understand that how we approach correction actually can make a difference in how the correction is received. And as much as I'd love to believe that everybody I talk to is going to recognize, my spiritual authority, and everybody that I talk to is going to receive things the same, the truth is that older folks receive our correction differently than younger folks. And particularly with regard to, so my age is, I'm getting closer to the middle every day. I think I haven't probably passed the middle yet, although if the average age of lifespan of a man is in his 70s, maybe I have passed the middle. I don't know. Um, but in terms of, we have folks that are 90 in our church, and we have young folks, so I'm not quite in the middle of that. Um, but so if I'm talking to somebody older and I show them the respect that they have earned over their years of faithfulness, over their years of wisdom that they have gained, if I am humble in my correction of them, and I'm not talking down to them as one who's got it all figured out and knows more than they do, but rather as one who is I don't have it all figured out, and I don't know more than everybody, but I am called of God. And so how I approach a correction for somebody older is probably should be different than somebody younger. And the truth is that is also true of somebody older in Christ or somebody younger in Christ. In other words, the length of time they've served God. So I have found that some of us who are more assertive, if we're not careful, can really turn off longtime Christians and older folks. Now, can somebody who's young and assertive and come in and build a great youth group and build a great maybe church plant with all brand new believers and younger people, maybe, yeah, you can go if you don't know how to have humility. It's going to probably cause you a problem no matter what. But if you don't know how to handle somebody that is older than you in the faith or is older than you may still be able to do a great ministry to folks that are inclined to listen to you. I've seen people who struggle to lead a church because they struggle with relating and leading people that are older than them and more mature. But they do an amazing job leading brand new converts. And why? Well, probably because they're still struggling with being able to interact with people that are more mature than them or older than them, and lead with the humility that it takes to do that. And I'll be honest with you that's happened in my life. I've struggled sometimes, but I hope that I've learned and grown over the years, and I'm doing that better than I used to. So he says, don't rebuke an older man harshly, um, but exhort him as if he were your father. Exhort. Strongly encourage or urge someone to do something, an older man, as if he were your father. So instead of correcting, we're urging, we're encouraging, we're not correcting harshly, but rather saying, giving encouragement toward a different way. And there's humility with that. I know some people, particularly young leaders, particularly some of the staff that we're raising up, that I've watched them, and they won't correct anybody. They won't, that's not my role. But as soon as you say, no, you really should be bringing some correction, you really should be leading and changing the direction, then they immediately like put the hammer down. You can't do that. And I'm like, okay, do we have a happy medium? Do we have somewhere in between where your correction, or is it either no correction or correcting harshly? Is that the only choices we have, or do we have some sort of wise and humble leadership in between, where we can use our influence and encourage people to change? I've watched that, with some of our younger leaders, newer leaders. Sometimes they're not necessarily young, but they're new to leadership, and they don't know how to do anything. But I had a young staff member years ago that said, "Well, I think we need to require this." And I'm going to put in a policy in place to require this. And he didn't do this, but I do that, because when I hear the word require, I'm like, how do you like? What does it look like to require something? Okay, I'm not the federal government or the state government. I don't have a police force. So if I require something in the church, then what am I going to do? Am I going to kick somebody out of the church if they don't do what I require? Probably not. Am I going to kick somebody out of a ministry if they don't do what I require? Maybe. Um, but I remember having that discussion with that young staff member and saying, let's not use the word require. Let's use the word expect. What do I expect? What are my expectations for somebody that is in a role in leadership in our church? What are my expectations for somebody who's on the worship team? What are my expectations for somebody who is in membership in our church? What are my expectations for somebody that I feel is growing in their faith and is solid and might be considered for any of these things? Um, I can't require you to do anything. You're welcome to never do anything that I say. I mean, if you're in our church, you can do that if you want. It's gonna make tension. There's gonna be struggles, but you can do it. People have done it. If you're watching this on YouTube, you don't I don't you don't have to do anything I say. You don't have to watch the rest of this video. I can't require you to do anything. I don't have a police force that's going to come and find you. Um, but can I urge you to do the will of God? Can I encourage you to do what is right? Can I tell you what my expectations are for somebody that's going to be in leadership in our church, and what I think God's expectations for us are for the church in general? Yeah, I can say that, and that's a different way. It's still correction. It's still using influence to help you understand what the will of God is for your life, but it's certainly a different kind of presentation. Um, and some there are moments that we may have an authority in somebody's life that we may need to push harder, and we've earned that authority, we've earned that voice in their life by pouring our life into theirs, that we are a more mature believer and perhaps older, and they're younger and newer to Christ, and we need to push harder perhaps, and there are times for that. But there are also times where I believe Paul is advising Timothy that you could do that, but it's probably not going to work. So here's what I suggest you do. And that's why I say that these instructions are wisdom from God on what leadership in the church should probably look like. And if you rebuke an older man harshly, does that mean in every case where you ever do that, then you're in sin and you're going to hell? You know, Probably not. That's probably not that what that means. But is this good advice, particularly for younger leaders? Yes, I think it is. Number two, what about older women and younger women? So he says treat younger men as brothers, and we kind of skipped over that part. Older women as mothers, younger women as sisters. So older women as mothers, which is much like what he says about older men as fathers. The younger men as brothers, and the younger women as sisters. Um, so I had a rough relationship with my younger sister when we were kids. I think I have a much better relationship with my younger sister now. Um, do we argue occasionally? Not as much as we used to, certainly. But I also look out for her. I remember my sister. It really changed when we went to college because I was about 3 years older than her, so I was a senior in high school when she was a freshman, and so in a lot of ways, when I left, she was a little kid to me. Although not so, maybe that wasn't so true. She was not as much of a little kid as I thought she was, perhaps. But when we got to college, you know, um, she came in and she was, I came in my freshman year. I handled things pretty well, I think, in general. Maybe I was a little lonely at times, but I made friends and I figured things out. My sister considered leaving and going to a different college because she just wasn't sure she was kind of in the right spot. And a lot of that had to do with just working out new social relationships and being away from our parents. I was the older independent one. She was a little more tied to the parents. Than I was. But she came to the same college as I did, and so she had somebody there. And that was the first time I really felt like I needed to be the one to look out for her. Whereas before she was just the irritating little sister. When we got to college, I felt like I needed to look out for her. And I'll never forget, she came I was in the training room in the athletic center, and she came up to talk to me, and we talked for a few minutes. This was like the first week of school, and she walked away, and one of my friends said, "Whoa, who was that hot girl you were talking to?" And I was like, "That's my sister." And I um I think, I'd like to think that there's something in our family genes that makes our family somewhat attractive. I don't know. These days, I can't see much that would attract anybody to this, but my wife has stayed with me. It's for probably my wonderful personality and not my good looks. I don't know. My son was pointing out the wrinkles on my head the other day. That's really helpful. It's really encouraging. I appreciate him. Um, but hopefully there's some kind of good genes of attractiveness in our family. I don't want to say that my sister isn't attractive. She's married, and somebody apparently found her generally brain wise, personality wise, maybe physical attractive. Okay, I have never really looked at her that way, honestly. I, it just weirds me out to think of my sister as hot the way my friend in college did, and I was a little disturbed that he thought of her that way. And that's where we're going with this, because this is the only spot when he talks about younger women as sisters where he says, with absolute purity. So before he was talking about how to teach and how to respond, but he's taken a little bit of a turn and said, yeah, and maybe you should teach younger women too. But if you do, you need to think about them. You're going to be tempted to think about them in the wrong way. I want you to think about them as a sister. Um, so now, with as much as it weirds you out to think your sister would be hot, that's probably exactly how much it should weird you out to think about some younger woman in the church that way. And instead we probably ought to be protecting them from honestly predators. And when we talk about predators, a lot of times we talk about people that are, ready to be arrested, people that have taken advantage of somebody in a way that they should be arrested. But honestly, anybody who looks at somebody and thinks about what they can get out of them is a predator. So if that's how you look at women, you are a predator. You are thinking about what you can get, not about their well-being and their good. And so I think it has actually become the norm in our society for us to look at other human beings as a predator, and we have excused it and explained it away instead of realizing that we ought to be protecting one another and caring for one another. And so, how I wanted to protect my sister is how you ought to think about other women in the church. To protect them from people like you would be without Christ, or people like you are tempted to be. And we should be protecting them from people that don't have their good in mind, but rather have their own pleasure in mind. And so I think, boy, I don't know how if I can explain it any better than that. I think we'll go with that. Number 3, how are you doing with this? A, good. B, not so good. Or C, that's why I just mind my business and don't try to tell anybody anything. So we're going back to the rebuking harshly, and I don't think that that's the answer. I think we need to think about people with love and care for them. Let me just go back to if we're a young pastor, a young leader, bringing admonition to an older believer, older man. Um, why would we not be encourage them to change in a way that they would listen? Well, because we don't think we have to, because we think they should just listen to us. Well, that's selfish too. And so these are all heart conditions. They're heart problems for us, how we look at other people. And so that's what Paul's really encouraging Timothy is in your leadership and in your care for the people under your care, under your watch. Um, don't have a bad heart. Don't have a heart condition that would cause you to look at them wrongly, but rather look at them and how you can care for them, how you can lead them, how you can protect them, how you can raise them up to be all that God would have them be. Number 4, what would the church look like if we treated each other like family? A, not so good considering the way a lot of people treat our family. A lot of us treat our family. That may be true. Amen and ouch. B, we would treat people with a lot more respect. Well, I hope that's how we treat our family, and I hope that's the idea of what Paul is saying. C, we would respond to people in a way that does not avoid the truth about changes that are needed in order to better reflect God's will for our life, but we would say it in a way that enables us to continue to live together the next day. So you need to ask the question, how can I be a faithful witness to the will of God in somebody's life and be that today and tomorrow and in the future? So, how can I speak the truth to somebody in a way that they know I love them and I'll still have a chance to speak the truth to them tomorrow? So sometimes we speak the truth and feel like, I don't care if they ever listen to me tomorrow or again. As long as I had the chance to speak the truth to them today, I've done my job. And that, I don't believe that. I don't think that's right. I think you need to speak the truth, but you need to speak the truth in a way that not only expresses the truth, but also allows you to continue expressing the truth in their lives tomorrow and in the future. And so if you say, well, I'm going to declare the truth, but they're never going to listen to me again, you might want to stop. Now, we can say it the best, and some people will turn us off and be mad at us. And so I get it. But um, how can we do our best to speak the truth in love so that people know that we love them and we have more and more opportunities to speak the truth in love in the future? And I think that's what we really need to ask ourselves. Number 5, how does 5:4 say, I think there's missing a word, say we should treat our family when they need support? So it says, but if a widow has children or grandchildren, they should learn, first of all, to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family and so repaying their parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. Continue to ask them to support us even into adulthood. Let me just say, my parents have been so helpful in my life, and they have supported me at times when I was in crisis. They have helped me out of a bind. Many of those times I got myself into crisis, and I felt very much like the prodigal son, begging for help and repenting and say, I don't deserve any help, but I'm asking for help, and they have been so gracious to me. Um, but to continue to depend on your parents when you are adults, is you're doing something wrong. You're planning, if you're grown and you're living in your parents' basement and they still buy your groceries and you're not paying rent, you're doing something wrong. Okay, you're not. You should be getting to a place. And I understand our economy is different these days, and sometimes it's so expensive to find a place to live in certain parts of the country and whatever, that people are living with their parents longer than they did years ago. I understand that that's true. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but that should not be the long term plan. There should be a long term plan that allows you to support yourself, because eventually you are going to need to take care of your parents. And that used to be the retirement plan, is I have kids and they will take care of me when I'm old, the way that I have taken care of them when they're young. And But there's a lot of people that really experience this failure to launch and never grow up and never be the productive one that can now help their parent. And that's a problem. The problem sometimes starts when we don't become all that God wants us to be, and we remain dependent instead of becoming responsible. But it says, B, we should put our religion into practice. C, care for our own family. So in other words, if a widow has kids and grandkids, those are the people that should be supporting them. Now, I've we have situations like this in our family where certain family members have made some bad decisions themselves, and so I think there would be some people that say, well, what about this? Why aren't you supporting this? We have gone above and beyond to help people outside of our family and within our family, and we have said this is what we can do, and we have some stubborn family members that have chosen a different plan that we can't support. Um, I have a father-in-law, for instance, that found himself homeless because of foolish decisions that he made. I went in and became his power of attorney. I went in and we brought him in and brought him into our home in a way that was what we felt quite over and above, because he was not really a father to his kids, never really there for them for anything. But we're Christians, and it doesn't matter that he was never there. We were there for him. We brought him into our home. We set up a plan where he could be taken care of. It seemed like physical and mental illness were happening, and we got him into a situation that was safe and healthy for him. And then he blew it. He threw it all away, smoking weed, got kicked out of the the assisted living, the skilled nursing facility that he was in, because he wouldn't stop smoking weed. In the building with the oxygen tanks and everything. And we said throughout that we said, this is what we're doing for you. But if you choose to do something else that ruins this, we're not your continued fallback plan. And what's funny is we've become the parents. That's how I would talk to my child, and we've become the parents to irresponsible people that should be parents, but instead they're like our children. And so um, I say all this because I've seen Facebook posts that say, and we've gotten phone calls. Why aren't you doing this for so and so? Why aren't you doing that? You don't necessarily know what we've done behind the scenes, and the help that they've rejected. And so um, I guess I'm maybe getting a little defensive, because I feel like I want to, I have, believe I have been a good model of how we should take care of our family. But I don't think that means that we should become enablers of our family's bad behavior. If somebody has poor financial and spending habits, I've sat down with somebody and said, you can't afford to live here. You can't afford this. You can't afford that. So with what you have, you can afford this and you can't afford that, and I can help in this way, and I'll pay for this and I'll pay for that, and I'll set you up so you can afford to live. Now, if that person then goes out and blows all their money and spends it on things that they don't need, and does not pay property taxes or whatever, and I tell them I don't have I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars in a bank account. I'm a pastor. If I set things up like this and tell you this is how I can help you so you can survive, but I can't come in and bail you out with $1,000 when you don't do this, when you are a poor steward, then then when you put on Facebook that you're in a bind, and everybody starts calling me and says, why don't you help? I'm gonna say I did help, and I told them what I could do and what I couldn't do. So we should not become enablers. This is not about becoming enablers. But honestly, I don't think that's the situation that most of us are in. I think a lot of us, the one that has been enabled is actually us. That we are still dependent on our parents and have not become the responsible party to help our parents. And Paul is correcting that. He's saying that is wrong. We should be repaying our parents. This is D, repaying our parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. Um, so you should prepare yourself to be able to help your parents when they need help. Number 6, what does Paul say about widows in verses 5 through 8? Okay, he says the widow who's really in need and left all alone, in other words, one that doesn't have children and grandchildren, puts her hope in God and continues night and day to pray and ask God for help. Um, this is where we talk about being enablers. But the widow who lives for pleasure is dead even while she lives. Give the people these instructions so that no one may be open to blame. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. But no widow should be put on the list of widows. So he says, okay, if the widow has children and grandchildren, they should take care of her. No, and he says again, if you've been taking care of, don't say, oh, the church has a ministry for that. I'm going to stop doing that so the church can provide. Nope. If God's calling you, you provide. Okay, but widows who are godly and need help should be cared for by the church. But if a widow lives for pleasure, then they should not, the church should not be an enabling entity. And that's what this is definitely talking about here from verse 6 through about verse 10. The church welfare list, if you will, the church help list should not be an enabling ministry that allows people to live for themselves and not for the glory of God, but continue to get, so now I don't have to work to eat. I don't have to do these things to eat because I'm being given something. And now that I'm being given something, then I can use my time for ungodly things. That's not what this is about. That shouldn't be it. Um, So A says the widow who is really in need and left all alone puts her hope in God and prays night and day to pray and ask God for help. Yes. B, the widow who lives for pleasure is dead even while she lives. Yep. C, anyone who does not provide for their own household is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So widows who have living families should be provided for. So that's what we're talking about. Number 7 says in verses 9 and 10, Paul lists widows who might need the assistance of the church and be put on the list of those that help. What are the attributes of this sort of widow? They need to be over 60. They need to have been faithful to their husband. In other words, we're not talking about somebody who's been unfaithful and wound up single because of their unfaithfulness. They need to be known for their good deeds, such as bringing up children, showing hospitality, washing the feet. In other words, they're somebody who has cared for others. They're worthy of being cared for when they are in need. Helping those in trouble, devoting herself to all kinds of good deeds. So we need to ask, if we're somebody who is asking the church for help, are we that kind of person? Whether we're a widow or not, does that describe our life? Because otherwise, the church has a tendency to be giving help to people and enabling them. And honestly, we struggle with the balance of this. There's a lot of the help that we give for our homeless population that sometimes feels like it's enabling them to stay homeless. And we wrestle with this. And how do we help people without being enablers that allow them to continue to survive in this? We don't want them to die out on the street. We want them to hear the gospel. But honestly, we want them to be responsible members of the society. And so how do we've wrestled with that, and we've tried to change some things in our ministry to try to do this better. What counsel does Paul give to younger widows according to 11 through 14? For younger widows, do not put them on such a list, for when their sensual desires overcome their dedication to Christ, they want to marry. Now, you would think from that statement that he doesn't think they should marry. But what he says is, verse 14, so I counsel younger widows to marry, to have children, to manage their own homes, to give to the enemy no opportunity for slander. So in other words, I tell them, go get married again, get remarried, have a family, do the things that, don't remain single and be in this situation. You're so young that you're opening up your life for idleness. Now, in Jewish society in particular, because of the way things were, a widow did not have an opportunity for income. Even outside of Jewish society, in that day, women couldn't just go get jobs. So I'm not sure that we should apply this and say, yeah, younger widows should get remarried. Maybe not. But they shouldn't sit there and say, well, the church has to provide for me for the rest of my life. They should consider whether I need to go back to school and get a job that I can support my family. Do I need to get remarried perhaps? God, I think God gives direction on that. And some people chase after a savior and a support system in a man. That's probably not a good idea. Um, Oh boy, we're taking longer on this one than our normal Bible studies because there's a lot here. Number 8, what do you think Paul is trying to accomplish by suggesting these guidelines? A, he is setting up a legalistic standard to be held on to for all time. Nope, no, I don't believe that. And I don't think we should interpret it this way. B, he is making some suggestions based on his experience in the church. Yes, I do believe that. C, he is trying to make sure the church does a good job of taking care of people who don't have anybody else to care for them. Yes. D, he is trying to make sure that the church doesn't enable people so that they get involved in sinful and inappropriate activities. Yes, he is. He's talking to us about what our charity should look like, and so that we don't end up enabling people to continue in their sinfulness. Number 9, what does verse 16 tell us? If any woman who is a believer has widows in her care, she should continue to help them and not let the church be burdened with them. It doesn't say whether that's family or what that means. But here's how I apply that. I had a person who was a staff member of our daycare years and years ago. Um, she met a guy who needed a suit for an interview. And she came to me and she said, Pastor, I was running the thrift store at the time. Pastor, can the thrift store give them a suit? And I said, oh, the thrift store has to help us pay our mortgage. So we can't always just give things out. I said, I don't think we can do that. And she said, but I feel like God's calling us to help him. And I said, then you should help him. You can buy the suit for him. She got very upset with that solution. If you feel like God is calling you to help the person, then you help the person. You're not helping the person if you come ask the church to help the person. You're just asking for somebody else to. I feel deeply convicted that God has called you to help this person. No, 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 no. That's not the way that works. If God has called you to help them, you help them. Don't say, oh, the church needs to help them. Say, God has called me to help them. Now, does the church have resources to help people? Sometimes we do, sometimes in kind. We don't have money, but we have in kind resources sometimes to help people. We have clothes and things, and that's great. But if if you go and say, can I get something for this person, and we say we don't have it, or we say that's not how this ministry works, this resource is for this, then and you say, but I've been called. Don't get mad at the church. You're the one that God has called. And so it's you that should help. And number 10, how should we as Christians respond to these instructions? I think we should respond to them not legalistically, but we should understand the principles that Paul is suggesting here. And we should apply those to our lives and ministry. Whew, this has been a lot. So I'm gonna end it there. But take this to heart and allow it to change you.